Hi there, my name is Colin. My mum and I lived together for years, until Charles came into our lives. He's my mum's boyfriend. I was totally surprised when he showed up, because since my dad left, like 10 years ago, my mum hadn't dated anyone. All she put herself into was me and her work. Mum had a small business. She opened a small but cozy coffee shop. The business was booming. In her circles, Mum was considered not only a successful lady, but also beautiful. Only everyone was talking about her getting a fiancé, like she had to do it. I was the only one who disagreed. What was the point? We're fine as we are. And then I come home from a walk one evening, and the table was set for 3. Son, we're expecting a guest. At that moment, a man comes in. He looks so neat, tall and trim. He said hello and gives my mother some flowers and me a comic book magazine. Comic books? Colin, how rude. Say hello and thank you. This wasn't good. When was the last time my mum tried to please somebody like that? I can't remember. Anyway, long story short, Charles stayed with us that night. I didn't realise until later that they'd been together for a long time, but they'd just admitted it recently. Mum didn't ask my opinion or how I felt or if I was uncomfortable. Especially since Charles wasn't exactly burning to make contact with me either. What was most annoying was that his stuff was all over the house. They were everywhere, even in my room. Then I didn't understand what his socks were doing in my room at all. In the mornings, I woke up early to shower, which was now perpetually busy. Charles used to bathe like it was the last time. He also liked to race around in his underpants and robe and drink his fucking smoothie for breakfast. Mum laughed unnaturally at his jokes, and I wondered, where was my real mum? Where was that strong woman? She's not like that by nature. Well, after 4 months, I was used to almost everything. Except for one but. Honey, don't you think it would be right to put Colin in baseball? Darling, what about transferring him to another school? I think every boy should know how to fight. Colin, clean up your room. Turn off the computer at night, or it'll burn up. Get me some milk and fruit from the store. Colin, you dress like a loser. Why don't you buy some clothes? He was meddling all right, but the fact that he was invading my life was infuriating. Right down to my parenting. And you know what? My mum listened to him. She thought a man's view on raising her own son was more correct, like Charles knew better or something. He didn't. He didn't give a shit about me. Was I the only one who could see that he only wanted to show off for my mum? He was actively creating the illusion that he cared about me. But she didn't see what was really going on. Charles created the perfect conditions for my survival. He kept invading my room, pointing his finger at me, saying, "This is how you clean, this is how you do your homework." And then he would watch my reaction and enjoy my anger, my anxiety. One day I couldn't stand it anymore and I told him to stop. What did you say? It's up to me now, okay? What the hell? Who are you anyway? I'm your stepdad. Being my mum's boyfriend doesn't make you my stepdad. And I'm not a boyfriend, I'm her husband. We legitimized our relationship, didn't you know? What? When? A week ago. I thought your mum shared that news with you. When I asked her, she looked embarrassed and just looked at the floor. And then she said that she didn't think I would notice the change and that things would stay the same. But I could see that my stepfather was thoroughly pushing me out of the house. I only put up with it all because of my mum. She was kind of happy with him. It seemed to me that if I destroyed her relationship, I will do worse, not for myself, not for him, but for her. So I kept silent. Meanwhile, Charles was actively involved in my mum's life. He ran her business, brought something new. On the one hand, there was harmony between the two of them. But on the other hand, there were constant jerks in my direction from my stepfather. Scoldings, reproaches, and humiliations. My life became a living hell. But then it got even worse. Son, I have to go urgently on business in another state. Stay with Charles for a couple of days. He'll look after you. I can look after myself, Mum. I don't need his help. Don't say that. He loves you. Does he? Mum, he loves you and smoothies, but not me. Don't say that. Charles is very attentive. He's always interested in you. Yeah, how can I screw up? Don't say that, son. You're like a son to me. What did you say? We'd love it if you called him Daddy. What? I don't even call my father Daddy. I don't think I'm going to say it about him. Are you nuts or what? I got mad and slammed the door and stormed out of this crazy house. I was pounding so hard I wanted to slash the tyres on his car. I ran into the garage, found an old knife there and went over to the windshield. I wanted to scratch the hood, but a piece of paper with Charles's picture on it caught my eye. I gently opened the car door. A good thing the car was unlocked. A minute later, I had the file in my hand. What? Re-registering my mum's coffee shop? What the fuck? I grabbed those documents for myself and ran out of the garage. I hid this blue folder in the backyard. There was like a birdhouse. I just pinned it in the back so he couldn't see it. In the morning, Mum left, and it was just the two of us. Charles tried to take me out, bitching, bullying as usual. I said I was going to a friend's house and left. In fact, I went to my mum's place of work. From the moment she opened, Mum had hired Louise, the manager. This old lady had worked in the restaurant business for many years. She knew her business and did it to perfection. Because of her experience and knowledge, we got so well promoted. I hadn't been there in a long time, but I wanted to ask Louise something, and when I asked where she was, some young girl came out and politely informed me that Louise had been fired. I knew her address, so I went straight to it. Louise was very happy to see me. She let me in and we got talking. "How's your mother?" "Good, but she married." "To Charles?" "Yep." "Not good." "Why?" "I didn't like him right away, but your mother wouldn't listen and told him everything. Charles quickly fired me the very next day." "What did you tell my mum?" "I told her I didn't like him, that he was using her. She signed over the coffee shop to him." "Yeah, I found out. But that's not all. She wouldn't let me finish." "What was it?" After Louise's words, it was like I was electrocuted. I thanked her and told her I would finish what she started. Louise wished me luck and I ran away. The first thing I did was go to the local town records office. I needed to find something, but I didn't think it would be that hard. I had to dig through the dust for 2 days and bingo! I took the piece of paper I needed and ran home. My mum was supposed to come home that day. Charles was lying in front of the TV as usual, saying something to my back. I didn't even answer. I went into my room, found the right street on the internet and wanted to run on with my business. But at the door was Charles. "What's your hurry?" "I have to do something." "What do you have to do?" "That's none of your business. Go and watch TV." "I don't want to fight. Just give me the blue folder." My heart began to beat a little with excitement. I tried to pretend I didn't know what he was talking about, and Charles said he saw me running out of the garage. "I don't know what you mean." "Let's be nice. Your mum voluntarily rewrote the business because she can't handle it alone." "She did before, but now she can't?" "Now she's got me. Give me the file. I'll ask my mum if she knows about your past." "What past?" "You know, like your name isn't Charles, it's Fred. Like you went to jail for fraud, and you've got a dozen episodes under your belt." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You got it. Get out of the house." "Son, why are you doing this?" "I'm not your son." I tried to go through him, but he grabbed my arm and started twisting it. He suddenly turned into a beast. His eyes were red and he was shaking. At that moment, my mother came into the house and he immediately let me go and started saying that I had hit him and he was defending himself. I shouted that it wasn't true, screaming that I'd found the documents and that he was a crook. "Mum, there are people. He scammed. I can find their addresses. Let's check." But Mum was silent. I knew that was it. She didn't believe me. Charles was spitting nasty things about me in her ear, and she stood stone-faced as if she wasn't even breathing. After a moment, she pulled out a blue folder from behind her back, threw it at Charles's feet. He grabbed it and was like, "Thank you, honey. I knew you'd make the right choice." And Mum was like, "That's right. I made the right choice." And then the cops ran into the house, cuffed him and dragged him away. I had so many questions in my head. It wasn't later until my mum told me that she started poking around interesting facts about him too, especially when he got into her business. I could see she was hurting, but she made the right choice. I hugged her and said thank you. Mum cried, but that was it. What about now? Well, we try not to touch on that subject, but it served as a lesson for the two of us. No more faith in words, only actions.
My name is Hope. I think my mother gave me that name for a reason. She had hope for the best, a new life without violence. Are you familiar with domestic violence? Do you know what this is? I think many families have it, but not everyone knows that this is what it is. I think many people think that this is the norm. I'm going to tell you a story about my family. My mother was 20 years old when she met my father. She said that they met at university and it was love at first sight. They started a relationship and Dad proposed marriage to Mom a month later. She agreed, After that, something began that you can never be prepared for. Dad started drinking a year later when he lost his job. He had a good job and couldn't believe he'd lost it. Only my mother started working. She was pulling on their little family, which hurt Dad a lot. Sitting at home, he began to drink. First once a month, then twice and every day. My mother didn't notice how it happened. In short, he launched himself completely, even stopped shaving. A year later, it turned into a real nightmare. My mother did not have time to earn money. My father already sold everything from the apartment. Their situation was complicated by my mother's pregnancy. On rare days of a sober dad, he surrounded my mother with love, care, and rejoiced at the imminent birth of a child. But when he remembered about alcohol, he raised his hands to my mother. He hit her on the head, arms, legs, kicked her in her pregnant stomach, sometimes set fire to her clothes. My mother's entire body was screaming in pain. Each of her scars told of a day when my father had been drunk. So it became a walking book. The idea of leaving him was not even considered, because she was so brought up. They say once he hits, then she loves, and if she married him, then bear with it to the end. My mother had a difficult birth. The pregnancy was problematic. So I was born by cesarean section. My father was very happy at first, insanely happy, but then he decided to wash it off, and it started. As soon as my mother returned from the hospital, she was met by an angry man with a hangover and demanded to bring vodka. My mother tried to do anything to keep him from touching me, so they lived for several more years. By the time I was 5, I was already clearly aware of what was happening. I still remember trying to protect my mother when he swung his fist at her. As a result, I was hit, fell to the floor, and broke my arm. My mother perfectly understood this pain. By that time, she already had almost everything broken. All her ribs, arms, legs, 6 concussions, and an ever-blue body with bruises. We were already known by local doctors. Neighbors called the police, took my father to the station, but my mother did not write a statement. He would come out, say thank you, and beg for forgiveness on his knees. And 2 days later, the picture would repeat itself. I grew up in this environment. I don't know any other environment, except from stories. When I became a teenager, I realized that I could not communicate with boys. That is, at my age, almost all my classmates had relationships, first kisses, love, and so on, and I could not even imagine for a second that someone was next to me. I didn't have many friends either. The girls were a little squeamish about me because I was poor, almost always wore the same clothes, and didn't really communicate with anyone. I will emphasize once again, I thought that such a situation in the family is the norm. That was until I got a job. On my 18th birthday, I went for a walk around the city and accidentally saw a leaflet with the inscription, "Waitress required." Since I had experience in the service sector for a long time, I quickly got a job in a cafe. This money kept me afloat while my mother was still in the hospital with bruises. There, I got into a conversation with one of the visitors, and she invited me to work in an international organization. She said that I would study there and learn a lot about what every girl needs to know. I agreed and came to the organization's office on the specified day. I saw a lot of women there. All of them were of different ages, races, and religions, but one thing was common. They were all beaten at home by their husbands, or they were born in such an environment. From there, I learned that there are a lot of people like me in our city, but many people are silent about it because they are ashamed, because they consider it the norm, because they are threatened, or because they are under moral pressure. So the concept of family violence is not normal. It turns out that it happens that the husband beats his wife, then the police took him away, and his relatives, finding out about it, put pressure on the wife, and she wrote a statement that nothing has no claims. Is that fair? People who worked there said that most women tolerate this attitude because of not knowing what to do and where to go. But in fact, there are many organizations that provide psychological, material, and moral support to victims of family violence. I have learned my rights, and now I understand them at the legal level. I advise you all to familiarize yourself with your rights. It will be useful and give you confidence. After a while, I told my mother, and I tried to get her out of this shit. I'd already planned a new life without my father. I imagined that my mother and I were renting an apartment together, living there and finally enjoying life. But it turns out that for so many years, you can get used to such treatment. My mother began to cry and told me to go alone because there was no way to save her. I didn't want to hear those words. At that moment, I hated my father because he had crippled not only her body, but also her soul. And for that, I now don't trust people. I'm not confident. I'm afraid of men and avoid any intimacy, even friendship, for the fact that my concept of family is fear, anxiety, and danger. I do not want children and maybe do not want them ever. You may ask, what has become of him over the years? He still drinks, is very ill, and now does not even take breaks as before. The alcohol consumed him completely, and I lost all hope of an adequate conversation with him. And Mom won't leave him. It's strange, but she loves him, and very much. That day, I packed a modest bag of things and left the house. I knew that I needed a specific reboot, and I couldn't do it alone. Those people offered to help me, and I agreed. Since then, I have learned a lot, and gradually began to work in this field myself. Now I am fighting for women's rights, for the absence of family violence, for women to finally know that there is no physical violence in a real family, that it happens that you do not need to save a child from his father, that husbands can kiss, give gifts for holidays, and love, that the house is a temple, not a battlefield, and the family represents only love. So I share my story with you, so that you also know and remember it.